similarity between Zohran and Trump, in my opinion, is their focus on mass politics. They're not trying to calibrate for the center, and they're not trying to reflect the party as it is. They are trying to cut the party out, reach people directly, and those people shift the party.
Astead Herndon, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm pumped to be here.
So, you are not only a multiple-time guest on the Stay Tuned show, you are, I guess we're about to be, I think you already are, my podcast colleague and brother. Am I correct?
Yes. We are now podcast cousins, I think.
Podcast cousins. Okay, once you start, we can talk about brotherhood. But
yeah.
Cousins,
we haven't actually
I guess.
started the podcast yet. Yes,
we're like work friends.
Yeah.
Or the only thing worse than work friend is we're DC friends. Do you know that term?
I actually count work friends a lot higher than DC.
Okay, yeah, we're like DC friends.
I look forward to growing in our friendship and colleagueship. I'm excited to join Vox.
Could you just tell listeners what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So last week was my first week starting at Vox Media. I'm joining Vox.com as a host and editorial director. I am launching a podcast next year, and then we're making some content as we build to that. But more so, like, I am just leaving the more traditional legacy time structure and trying to embrace different forms of journalism. I think that the way reporting works right now, as long as you can do it, people will take it in whatever way you're giving it to them. And it doesn't have to be in that more traditional newspapery language. And I'm excited to see how we can help people understand politics when we're freed from premise of time subscriber.
You know, I always forget how young you are. I don't know if other people mention this because I feel quite old these days. And I was looking back at your bio preparing for this interview, and I had forgotten that you were named to Forbes magazine's 30 Under 30 in 2020. So
yes.
How much
20...
under 30? Did you just make it? Were you like 29 point?
No, I was 27. It was 27. I could tap out.
You're 27 in 2020, which makes you, what does that make you now? 28?
32. I'm 32 now.
You're
I'm
very young.
On March 31st. You know, honestly, this is part of my even thinking about leaving and evolving. You know, I came to the Times at 25. That was a shock job.
Evolving? You just got out of childhood.
That's what I'm saying. I need to change. I need to, and so I feel like I have been young person in newspaper place for a long time. And that's really worked out for me. I really have loved the way that it's like trained my brain.
But it's interesting. Like you're at 32, you're already an alum of the New York Times. Most people spend a lifetime trying to get to the Times. So
no. Yeah. I'm an alum early, but I was hired early. So circle of life.
Well, congratulations on that. So I guess my first question before we start talking about Democrats and Republicans and whatever the MAGA people are, and the mayor's race, which is coming up, I can just say the mayor's race, and I don't have to specify that I'm talking about the great city of New York, because that's how arrogant we are in New York. But I guess my first question is, why is politics your beat? We have this discussion. I've had it a bunch lately. A lot of people are tired of politics. Depending on what side they are, I think Democrats are a little bit more tired because they're not winning. And they turn away and they stop watching the news, and it's too much for them. It's too painful. You to a greater extent than I, because I have another job also, and I don't only cover politics. You can't turn away. This is your whole bread and butter. Do you go through cycles of like, God, I wish I was covering sports or something else?
Honestly, my origin in politics actually is connected to sports. I joined journalism in college thinking I wanted to be a sports journalist because that's where I got like outlet and enjoyment. And then I realized, actually, I just want to watch and hang. I did not want to actually cover. And so the way I deal with, I think, what a lot of people deal with when it comes to politics is by channeling my frustration, channeling my interest, channeling my hope, all of those things into our work. And so, I think for me, I really identify with a lot of people who have felt like politics is broken, who have felt like political systems weren't listening to people, who have felt like a game was kind of rigged. In fact, I feel like what my goal has been over the last 8 years has been to help give people language to explain why they feel like that. And so I didn't want, the reason I kind of do this stuff is because I actually really dislike how I feel like sometimes political insiders, kind of establishment-y types, gaslight folks into acting like their feelings of unjustness or their feelings that, people are kind of written out of system are invalid. When in fact, I think you can know a whole bunch about the political system, know all the people involved, and it still adds up to about the same thing. And so that's really what I find my work to be, is giving people who feel that sense of distance the reasoning and language of why they feel like that, because then I think it empowers them to act on it.
And when you come to Vox, are you a news journalist or are you an opinion journalist? Are you both? Because you mentioned channeling your own sort of views and feelings. That's not how people often think of journalists.
Yeah, well, in general, I would say that the distinction between news and opinion is a helpful one I've lived in for a long time. I don't consider myself an opinion journalist, but the fact that like voice and view is in journalistic work, I think is true for everybody. So, you're making a choice with your first quote. You're making a choice with the ending.
Bro, I don't pretend to be a neutral journalist at all. I don't know.
And so I guess I'm saying,
I don't know what I am.
I guess I'm saying is like, I've never thought of that performance of objectivity as my goal. I thought as fairness as my goal. I thought as accuracy as my goal, context, all those type of things. But it's not as if I couldn't be frustrated. You know what I'm saying? And so I've always felt comfortable with saying, oh, I'm doing this story partially because I too recognize that frustration.
Right. Do you vote, Astead?
Yeah. And
there's some journalists who don't.
Yeah, I never got the performance of not voting. You get what I'm saying? I'm like, if it took a vote for me to
Katie Tur would like to have a word.
I'm just saying, if it takes
Katie Tur doesn't vote.
I can just speak personally. If voting for someone means I could not cover them objectively, I would find myself to be bad at my own job. That's not how I even think. And so voting to me is not the thing.
But if you're voting for somebody and I wasn't even thinking about something so direct, but if you're voting for somebody and you're covering them, will you say in the story that you voted for them?
I don't think you need to do that. I don't think anybody needs to reveal who they voted for. All I'm saying.
But if you're writing an article about the very person you voted for, you don't think so?
I don't think inherently. To me, what you owe people is transparency about process. It's transparency about how you went about collecting facts and let them decide whether they think that's accurate or not. If that transparency burden is met, I don't care who you voted for. I don't care what you do in your spare time. If it's truth, accurate, and you can prove that, it doesn't matter to me. And so one thing I think is actually important, to go back to the original point about news and opinion, is I'm currently reading this book about Black newspapers, and it really reminded me about how much that form of voice and advocacy was historically true of a lot of journalists who were outside of the mainstream for a long time. And in fact, that news objectivity opinion distinction was one that was often created by mainstream outlets to absolve themselves of stories they weren't covering. And so all I'm saying is I don't even see the act of having voice as incompatible with doing good work. And in some ways, I think if you ask the people I would consider journalistic heroes, folks like Ida B. Wells and others, they would say that voice was necessary to doing that work.
But if I don't mean to push too much on this, but
you can get, okay.
If you were being paid by CNN to be a spokesperson and you were covering a story about CNN's financials or their future.
But being paid and voting is already not the same thing. So if I was being paid by someone, you for sure should say it.
If you've given money to a candidate, would you say it?
I would never give money to a candidate.
Oh, you would never give money to a candidate. So why not?
Because I think that's
speech.
Different.
It's speech instead. The Supreme Court says it's speech.
I think that's a different thing. I personally would never give money to a candidate. Now, again, you can give money.
But that's interesting. You wouldn't give money to a candidate for journalistic reasons? Or you think it's not a good use of your money?
All of the above. I can't even think of a reason I would.
That's super interesting. So if there's a candidate
but you're talking the language of politics. I don't really think like.
Well, so I'm trying to understand that.
And so all I'm saying is, if you're asking about
a lot of your readers who read about the political stuff, they give $10 to a candidate, or they give $100. Or some of them give. Some of them you have some readers who probably give millions of dollars, because that's the kind of broad range of people who read you. So are you saying to them that they're wasting their money?
Listen. People go to Carbone to eat Italian every night, and I think they're spending.
I can't get in. I can't get in.
People do a lot of things that I wouldn't.
Can I just say right now? I've never. You brought it up. I can get into most restaurants Preet Bharara can't get into Carbone. So if anybody from
I'm sorry to hear that. I've been to
the
Carbone. I feel like you're cooler than me.
I mean, I've been there, but it was on.
You can't do it consistently. I get what you're saying.
I can't. These are the luxury problems that are not sort of addressing the real problems of affordability, which we're going to get to in a moment. But you brought up Carbone. I think there's nothing wrong with eating at a nice restaurant. I want to get to the mayor's race in a moment, but first, sort of, can you set the stage? So people don't like MAGA. In other words, less than a majority of folks are excited about Donald Trump. A lot of opposition. And it seems to me the only politicians as a category that the public likes less than Republicans is Democrats. Is that a fair numerical assessment?
Right now, numerically, anecdotally.
Yeah. So the Democrats get all, hot and bothered. I may be among them about the look, I don't have time and I have certain expertise. I am not an expert in the architecture and history of the White House. But when I see a bulldozer taking down the entire East Wing without any conversation or discussion, I don't know that I have the time to be upset about it. I certainly don't have the time to devote more than 1 minute on the podcast to it. And I think, how are people okay with that? And that's like, item number 170 after the things that are in my wheelhouse, like a specific un-American and I think unlawful campaign of retribution against politicians and adversaries that he doesn't like. So what's going on? What's the landscape like for Democrats and Republicans?
Well, basically, I think that fire hose of info, the fact that it's hard to keep up, is the point. So they're coming into this administration, and I think we'll see this consistently through it. They're not going to pick and choose priorities. They are going to flood the zone because the goal is a total remake of political, legal, economic system, culturally too. So I don't think we should insult them by not stating their intentions in full, And so that type of full-on fire hose is certainly the point. But to your kind of question, I don't know if Americans don't care, more so than I think what we have to change. I don't think there's a universality of care in the same way. I don't think everyone cares about the same things in the same way. And
right.
So
that makes sense.
There's a lot of evidence that people care about tariffs. There's a lot of evidence people think these ICE raids are bad. There's a lot of stuff that says that Donald Trump, the sequel, is not as popular or even as popular as he was before he got into office 8 months ago, a year ago. And so there seems to be a fair level of buyer's remorse if you just do like straight electorate kind of question. The question is there recourse for them, right? Like that becomes a structural politics thing about the midterms. And then also and this is something we find when we go back to our voters, is being upset with Donald Trump mean that they regret their vote? Not the same. So is being upset with Donald Trump mean they think he shouldn't have the authority to try what he said he was going to do? Not the same, right? And so we'll see these sentiments of regret, but because the other side isn't seen as having an affirmative option, because the system is largely seen as rigged, there's a little bit of an acceptance of like, okay, well, he's just going to do it either. And so that's what I'm saying is like a little bit of a distinction, is because I don't think people don't care. And I think it's easy to say that because it hasn't been expressed in the same ways it was. Yeah, but I'm like, it just means that the care is showing up differently. And something like the East Wing is important too, because I'm not sure people care about that in the same way. Like, I don't know exactly who the type is. It's not like I've done reporting here. We have hard numbers. Like, it would be clear. It's not clear to me because that's something like in the tradition bucket where I would just say to people, like, people's tie to those things are sometimes a lot less than you think, particularly if they felt very distant from him in the first place. And so I would be really interested to see, is the East Wing a precious thing that should be kept, or is it the process he's going about it? Or are people kind of into the idea of a big ballroom? I have no idea.
I feel like I heard more in advance and during about the paving of the Rose Garden.
For sure.
Than the demolition of the East Wing.
That's what I'm like, the surprise for sure. And the the image for sure. And I think it certainly upsets
the other aspect of that is
type of person.
Well, it's corruption. I mean, people, it's the $300 million being paid for by private folks like that. That's what gets me about it, not the aesthetics as much.
For sure. And I actually think this is a through line of a lot of Trump things. Like, sometimes I think we have to put the pieces together to say that even more so than the aesthetics, to your point, the overt shakedown of the TikTok deal, his open stating of who he wants to own Paramount, plus,
Yeah. The
what we're
plane
seeing
from
with the
Qatar.
ballroom, right? I'm like, that
You
to
forgot
me
the
is
plane.
exactly. I'm saying
He
like
could
that
just
type
park
of
the
open.
plane in the like sort of in the empty lot that was the East Wing and make that like where he has his receptions.
I'm saying that his type of open search of finders fees, his like open grift, that part to me is a through line that could be named more clearly by Democrats, by media, whoever. But I'm like, it's interesting though, because of the shock value, it gets focused on these individual instances. And I'm not sure there's the same level of reaction to those.
So here to me is an important divide, and maybe I only think about it as an important divide because I'm very specifically as a person in the public square on one side of this divide. But I hear about it all the time, and it's interesting to me, and I wonder what you think. As a matter of politics and campaigning and the gaining and retention of power by Democrats, the advice goes from the political class: don't go around talking about autocracy and fascism and democracy. That's important. We're not saying it's not important. It's vitally important. But nobody really gets it that much. That's not what motivates people to go to the polls. It's very esoteric. It's often overstated. So when you get out on the hustings, do they still have hustings? I don't even know what hustings are. But when they get out on the hustings, you 30 under 30 in 2020 definitely don't know what a husting is. I barely know what a husting is. And they get out on the so-called hustings, talk about kitchen table, whatever the kitchen table issues are, and prices and everything else. Now, I'm not a politician. I'm not running for office, neither school board, nor mayor, nor governor of a state. And my expertise is in the law, and that's what this podcast is often about. So I don't think I should stop talking about that stuff. But what about if you're Hakeem Jeffries? What if you're Chuck Schumer? What if you're, J.B. Pritzker? Do you buy that or not?
I'm someone who thinks we're a little too prescriptive about separating kitchen table issues and not. Like at this point, some of that stuff blends. And you can make an argument that Donald Trump brought trans women in sports as an issue to the kitchen table in the last election. And so I don't think that you can just separate those things and say that's some type of firm distinction. At the same time, I do think there's a fair point to say that Democrats have become more disconnected from working class stuff. Now, I don't think that manifests in the same ways that we often talk about. A lot of that cake, I think, was baked early with ignoring inflation and immigration 21, 22. I also think that it's oftentimes in the focus on issues. So, for example, I think there was a big focus from Democrats in the last several years on representation, on, including Black and brown people in certain rooms, particularly elite rooms, things like affirmative action and like that being a form of like growth to equality. I use that as an example to say that was a type of thing that doesn't hit for working class people of color, right? These are people who are largely not in elite spaces, who largely see those spaces as very distant from them, who have a broader question of public education and getting to college, much less how many Black people are in Harvard. And so I'm saying like that as an example of something that sometimes I think Democrats slid away from language that actually reaches the kind of least of them and really focused on things that were most tangible to people around them. And so in 2020, I think especially, there was a language of, I think COVID really pushed this kind of top-down language. I use race and criminal justice as a particular example because I think it helps make the point most clearly about the type of voters they lost in 24. When we're talking about non-college people of color, we're talking about first-generation Americans, they're not thinking in that same black-white prism. They're not thinking in that same, I think, college-focused version of equality. And so when we talk about Democrats kind of losing their way on kitchen table, I really think it's more about that than it is about, kind of the way they often make that distinction. Because I'm like, I think the most important thing, like let's use the trans women in sports example for this too. Like that was an issue that has clearly gone away from them in the public opinion sense over the last couple of years. So they had two options. Frankly, they could go out and forcefully defend their position and try to change public opinion, or they can change their beliefs and kind of more match up with it. What they chose was neither, and I think that's the worst of the options. I think you either need to lead or you need to reflect where the public is at. You either need to change the structures or for something like democracy, you need to improve democracy, not just keep it the same. You know what I'm saying? And so that's what I feel like more would most connect Democrats with the people they're losing is if they acknowledge that right now things are not working. And so they were doing too much status quo defense in terms of structures and economy, where they should have been saying what we're doing now isn't working. And our pitch to you is one to improve it.
You said a number of really interesting things so far. There are two that struck me. One I want to get to now. So kitchen table, you said some of these issues are kitchen table issues. I want to make sure I understand what you mean. Are you saying that kitchen table issues are ones that are actually discussed by ordinary families at the kitchen table, as distinct from what a lot of people mean when they say kitchen table issues, which is how do we afford the stuff that's in our kitchen cupboard? So trans women, trans athletes doesn't affect, any consumers, buying
Right.
of eggs.
But
They talk about it at the kitchen
Yes.
table.
Yeah, so I'm saying usually we use those things. That term was born out of those things meaning the same
Right.
thing.
I always thought it was like, you know what I thought it was? And again, what do I
Yeah.
don't know what a husting is. So we should do some research. I feel like the kitchen table was where people paid their bills, right? Right. Or is it where you have a family conversation? And so you're paying your bills
I've
the
heard-
eggs.
Yes. And so but I think the thought was that people don't talk about culture at the table. Too.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's true anymore. I don't think that's true at all. And so one of the things I think is just different is, I don't think some of the rules of politics, particularly that governed parties leading up, and particularly Democrats, because Republicans had their own blow up of the rules with Trump. So I'm saying I think the Democratic rules had just needed updating, and they were lagging way behind in 24. There was a sense that they did not need to engage in culture. That's so wrong. There was a sense that they can kind of like, I think their kind of discussion about new media, old media was still lagging, right? That ship had kind of sailed. And so I just don't think that they had put themselves in the position to be where kind of the public was on many of those discussions.
Further to this, there's a phrase that Republicans have used sort of gleefully for themselves and derisively about Democrats, which is Democrats lose the 80-20 issues, right? An issue in the public square in which 80% of people, whether it's trans athletes or something else, go one way and Democrats go the other. And so here's the last example I want to give you, and I want to know if you think it's a kitchen table issue or not. So Donald Trump issues an executive order in the last couple of months about it being a misdemeanor if you burn an American flag. And boy, I'll tell you, as a lawyer, that is 100% unconstitutional. It's not even a close question. It's directly contrary to Supreme Court precedent. And I heard a Republican operative say, maybe it was Trump himself, but I heard a Republican operative say, yeah, so he puts forward this, and it's also not enforceable. He puts forward this executive order that most people think is reasonable, and it's going to cause a lot of Democrats to go out and burn American flags. And that's great for us. Do you have a reaction to that?
It doesn't surprise me because they understand the bait for sure. But I don't think what I don't think we should do is act like Donald Trump is Teflon, right? Like
He's not.
Like the man is unpopular. Like, and most of his actions are too.
Yeah.
And so,
well, you don't need to, like, it's like the bar exam, right? What do you mean, Preet? Why is it like the bar exam? All you do have to, you got to pass by 1 point.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. All I'm saying is that to me is an important starting point for when we're talking about what are the levels of pushback that can be effective, right? And so we do see moments when I think this administration is forced to reckon with things that might be outside the bounds. Or I think we see more pressure on Democrats to rethink the rules fully to match where Republicans are. But I think to me, it's more important to stress that we have an administration that is free to operate kind of without the bounds of popularity more than it is to say what they're doing is popular. I'm like, it's actually important to say that they're freed of the concerns of popularity because they've expanded executive authority in certain ways, because they're pressuring the courts in these other ways, right? Because they've minimized Congress's impact. Like, they have taken structural steps to insulate themselves from the question of their electoral blowback. And I find that to be more important than weather vaning whether the public likes him or not, because largely they like his diagnosis of problems and dislike his solutions, largely.
So here's the other interesting thing you said, among many, Astead, that I've been thinking about since you said it. You talked about the tradition bucket. Some people will write and be like, "You can't put tradition in a bucket. That's not where tradition belongs."
It's not really, yeah, that's fair.
Tradition belongs on a pedestal, Astead.
That's a fair.
What are you talking about, bucket? Like, that's, how young are you?
I'm saying, like, though, but in the coverage,
I think it's a fascinating concept, and that this is a good segue to the mayor's race.
yeah.
So there's a lot. So because some people don't care. And maybe they don't need to care. And who am I to judge whether you should or should not care about? So one tradition in American politics has been that experience is usually like a good thing to have.
Fair point.
Maybe some experience other than being a talk show host, or I'm sorry, a reality star, or other than being a sort of non-voting, non-bill introducing. He's older, backbencher in the state assembly to become the chief executive officer of the most important city. So let's talk about that. So why don't you introduce folks, because we forget that we're not necessarily the center of the universe in New York. We're 1 week out from the election. People are going to hear this podcast 5 days before the election, right? In New York City. Could you just very briefly, and then we'll get into the details, explain to people who's in the race at the end and what the dynamic is?
Yeah, so it's come down to 3 candidates of note. There is Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee, who is the 34-year-old assemblyman who we're kind of talking about here.
Did he make the Forbes list?
I don't think so. I don't think he was cool enough pre 30.
Oh,
he'll
man.
make it. He'll make 40 under 40. And he's certainly the leading candidate. His main opponent is Andrew Cuomo, former governor. And then you also have Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa, who's playing somewhat of a spoiler here as he rejects Cuomo's kind of insistence that he drop out. I think for me, there's a lot of portions of this race that are really applicable to Democrats broadly. And I don't mean that in a direct one-to-one, because this is different constituencies, different places, we know that. But I do think that Mamdani's success specifically has been with those communities that are the reasons that, Democrats lost the popular vote in November. Blue cities who had dropped off from D's, and mostly were young people, mostly are first-generation immigrants. I said that before. And also, I would put working class people of color in those buckets, right? Like, Democrats maybe don't need those voters every single day of the week, but they definitely need them in situations. And they're the type of people who have been growing more interested in Trump. And the reasons you had places like Queens and the Bronx have a big shift that actually helped Donald Trump win the popular vote. Now, Mamdani says he succeeds in those places because of his focus on affordability, on class issues, and the fact that he has made promises that are more tangible than your typical Democratic one. Free buses, free childcare. I'm forgetting the third free thing, rent freeze. And I say this to people as a helpful example of how these work. When I went to his rallies for writing this story for the Times Magazine, it was interesting because it was a call and response I haven't heard since a Trump rally. At a Trump rally, Donald Trump can say, build the wall, right? And I can't imagine a Biden or Harris policy that the crowd could fill in. But Zohran has that sort of quality. He says, we're going to freeze the rent. He says, we're going to make buses free. It's a rallying cry that's about that kind of mass politics rather than means-tested or bureaucracy delivering impact. And he told me that that's the key version of what he finds to be his success. He doesn't want to be someone who's going to have to pitch how this affected your life. He'd rather do 2 or 3 things and they have a tangible impact on everybody's life in the city. And I think that's kind of where an increasing lane, particularly of the left, is coming from in the post-2024.
But is it no longer an effective response like it used to be? How are you going to pay for that? So when Zohran Mamdani says, buses for free, does he then also say Mexico's going to pay for it?
Well, he says two things. He says a millionaire tax. He says an increasing millionaire tax, which is, I don't know, halfway supported by Assembly. I mean, this is the other thing about it.
But my question is, going to the tradition bucket, does it, like, has Trump forged the way? I mean, Trump said crazy, not credible baloney or malarkey, depending on who you voted for last time. Like building the wall and Mexico is going to pay for it was one of the, but there were many. And he kind of got, it was like, people sort of understood it was aspirational. Like, but is that what do people think that Mamdani, or do people require Mamdani to actually accomplish?
To do the things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my question.
The short answer is yes. And I think it's important to say, these are three things he can do. These are not crazy. These are not logistically crazy things. I mean, even his opponents, I talked to Richie Torres. I talked to people who were considered themselves centrists, people who don't like him.
How much is free? The buses for free. How much is that going to cost?
I don't know the exact number, but I can tell you that they already have done a free bus pilot through Albany. And so the only question here is, will he have to do it through the millionaire's tax? Will we have to push for the millionaire's tax or no? And there's a clear way that a lot of people think that Hochul will be able to find money elsewhere to give him a free bus multi-year pilot without raising taxes. And he has already made clear his goal is in what they get and not how they fund. He's already backed off of his promise of the tax. And so all I'm saying is they're already, in the conversations between him and Albany, you're already seeing where the compromise is coming. And so I don't think it's ridiculous to say, we know childcare is plausible-ish. We know he can freeze the rent because of the board. And I'm saying we've seen the movement with Albany. I think that's why he has shown a kind of transition through the general election. If he was still moving as he was doing in the primary, I think not reaching out to opponents, not doing a 180 on policing, not kind of reaching out to real estate companies and saying he sees a place for them in the city, I don't see how those things get accomplished. Those things have gotten closer to being accomplished because of the outreach that campaign has done. Now, I don't think that means that they necessarily get it done, but I do think it's different than build the wall because he's answered the question of paying for it and he's acted with those partners to at least create an infrastructure that makes it plausible. Now, where I think that there's a lot of other issues for him, more importantly, honestly, than what he's promised, is what might happen to him. In my opinion,
Donald Trump. So I was going to get to that. So all this you're talking about,
Trump is the thing.
Okay, let's jump ahead to that. We're going a little out of order, but it makes sense to talk about it here. So just so people understand, it's been a good campaign issue for Mamdani to be able to say that Donald Trump, who is still, even though he made some inroads, wildly unpopular in his home city, and Mamdani says Trump wants Cuomo to win. Not because it's good for the city, but because it's good for Donald Trump. And Trump has made clear that he wants to go to war because he thinks he's got frankly, he thinks he's got a weak lefty, non-pugilist as the future mayor of New York City, and he's going to ride roughshod over him. A, does Donald Trump mean it? And B, how's that going to play out?
All indications that he means it, and we have no idea how it plays out. I mean, that to me is the big looming thing here. Is you can kind of talk me into an argument that Trump is more hands off of a place like New York City because of his, transactional closeness with the Cuomos and Adams of the world, and the cities that he's wanted to pick fights with. Look what I'm from Chicago. Like Lord knows right now, because of his perception of a weak leftist mayor, it's caused an interesting dynamic. One, I think it's caused Chicago to rally around him and all of those type of things. But it's caused these clashes to happen that I think New York City would prefer not to have. They would prefer not to have ICE running around these streets, right? And so what I think is going to be interesting is there's pretty much universal recognition, even from Mamdani allies, that come week 2, the National Guard could be showing up. That Donald Trump's going to want a pick-a-fight to minimize Mamdani, that Netanyahu might come to test his promise of trying to arrest him, right? And so I think what the situation, to me, the actual policy planks that he promised in the primary are the most achievable part of what he's going to do. Like the issue to me is that he has become such a vessel and lightning rod broadly that it really that I know his answer is that you can't kind of acquiesce to Donald Trump. You have to fight back. But I do think it plants the seeds for a legitimate fight. You get what I'm saying? And I don't exactly know if that's one that, particularly like with the levers of federal funding that the federal government has been willing to pull, with the willingness that he's been able to, with Donald Trump's willingness to use the federal government as a means of retribution. I guess I'm like, I don't know if it's a fight I would love, but it might be a fight that's an inevitable one.
So there's a model that has presented itself in the last week. And that is the very, very, very popular mayor of San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was awaiting the federalizing of forces in that town that Trump loves to hate on. I think as much, if not more, than on New York. And there's a private phone call, as reported, between Trump and the mayor. And the mayor talked him out of it.
Yeah. But the tech billionaires really talked him out of it.
Okay. So A, what happened? B, is that a model for Zohran?
One, he did talk to her. And one, Donald Trump is more talk than action. So in general.
Well, there were troops in LA.
For sure. Yeah. But I'm saying more talk than action when presented with someone on the other side. He in my opinion, he's much better at firing, theoretically than actually. He's much better at conflict generally than he is hand to hand. Yeah. And so it would not shock me if a Zohran who would totally take it says, I'm going to go make the case to him directly myself. Sure. I wouldn't put it past that.
But let's talk about the strategy, because we're going to be dealing with this president for a number of years, not just Mamdani if he gets elected, but others as well. Is the strategy to be sort of with your base, as he is with his base, pugilistic and fighting and loud language, but then get on the phone and get your allies and get the people who like the guy? Like, there are more billionaires in Manhattan than in San Francisco.
Right. So I think it's two-pronged. I think one is the one you just isolated, is to ready your base for the possibility of some, Donald Trump resistance, but at the moment of kind of conflict, be willing to engage with him directly, for sure. But I also think and I think he has to take that because he's kind of not afforded the other strategy that someone's taken, which is just to keep their heads down. Lord knows that I've been interested in a lot of these institutions who have taken that approach also. I think Zohran is past that. And so what he recognizes, what I've talked to people during that reporting, they're talking about creating a regional network of people who they think could get a message to the White House about ways to preempt if some federal funding is taken away from them. And so they have some form of recourse. I think even you can see his actions with police as an opportunity to try to ingratiate himself in case of some test of loyalty came. I think it's much easier for him if Donald Trump is kind of, making things more difficult to have a police union led by Jessica Tisch than somebody else. I think all of those actions were taken with a look ahead in mind that Donald Trump could complicate the initial several months, and that sort of clash was semi-inevitable. And so I think that is the strategy, is to ready the base while having those instances of pragmatism. Some of that is direct to Trump, but I would also say his keeping of the police commissioner is a core important part of that. He will risk the left backlash for the purposes of that stability.
That's a great segue into what I wanted to ask you next. Is he a savvy political athlete who went from nowhere to being on the cusp of being the mayor of the most important city in the country, if not the world? Or is he two-faced? Or is he way ahead over his skis? And is it possible today to navigate your left base and also pragmatically and responsibly, fiscally and otherwise, run a major city?
Well, here's the thing. Is one thing I think he recognizes the job of mayor is not the one that rewards ideological rigidity, right? So this is something he talked about to me, whatever, and whoever asked, is that he's reaching out to Bernie, not to talk to Bernie Sanders about like, you know, the same things you expect him to, but to ask him about how he matched his values with the day-to-day job of getting work done when he was mayor of Burlington, right? There's a recognition that the city requires, some of its institutional leaders, some of its longtime families or some of those rich families who might have been more uncomfortable. Some people who, I'm saying he has a recognition that mayor does not allow you to get away with the things you got away with in Congress, or you could get away with in Congress in terms of just, I have my view and nothing else. And so when in this general election, that's been who he's been reaching out to. Now, to your question about two-faced or not, he reaches out in a different version than he might have been 4 years ago, right? So he no longer, I think we can see the willingness to break on millionaires' tax as a part of it. He's reaching out to pharma CEOs, not changing his policies, but saying, how do you lead a team? I've never managed anybody. Teach me about leadership, right? So he's acknowledging those shortcomings as he's doing the reach out, but he's doing it often on issues that are not the actual policy that those two are going to disagree on. You know what I'm saying? So is that two-faced or is that not? I don't know. To me, that sounds like normal politics, and that sounds like a willingness to bring everyone into the fold. And so I would say, like, that's a good faith interpretation. You can also say that's like being who you need to be whatever time to get support. But I would argue that's most politicians. And so,
well, there's one in the race, and I would not ever vote for the guy, Andrew Cuomo, who I have had long dealings with professionally and personally. And I think has, based on my criteria, utterly disqualified himself to be an elected official from any precinct, much less the city of New York. We don't have to go into that, but
to me, that's a good point about experience, though, because in this race, I feel like experience itself has been kind of exposed as like, what are we asking here? Like, is Andrew Cuomo's experience a helpful thing for him to be elected next? Is it something that voters should hold in a positive?
A lot of reasonable people. Look, I don't vote in New York City anymore, so I don't have to face this dilemma. But I think all three are reasonable. We'll see how the winner does. I think it is not a crazy thing to say that all three you're severely wanting in terms of confidence in how it will go. Even Mamdani, if it seems like you like him.
Well,
a lot of people do. That's why he's in first place.
Really not like dislike.
We don't know. He's untested. Let me ask you a couple of questions about. First, I want to talk about Israel. Second, I want to talk about Israel and Gaza. But first, I want to ask you a question about his medal, Mettle, because I do feel that he is being characterized as like a kid, and he just got a big smile, and that's fine. There were concerns. I don't mean to compare him to Obama, who proved himself to be like a very tremendous political athlete. Which a phrase I don't love, but I'll use it. When I understood in 2008 that Barack Obama had what it takes to be like a steel-spined, pragmatic politician, do you know what it was? He was getting beaten up about his pastor.
Can you talk? If you want to talk about this, I hated this moment. This is a horrible Chicago moment.
Well, it is, but I will tell you. I will tell you.
It's actually a formative lesson in my life.
Barack Obama
about politicians.
Look, it says maybe it reveals something about me, because I think I'm as idealistic as they come. But I want my guy to win, and not by cheating, not by stealing, not by being abusive. But sometimes you got to do some things sometimes. And I thought, Obama's like a celebrity, and he's like very handsome, and he's got a big smile. And when he threw the reverend to the curb, awful, in all the ways that you, I'm sure, are thinking, but it told me that guy can maybe stand on the big stage and not be intimidated, and does what it, and he occasionally you need the instinct for the jugular. And Mamdani's going to need that with Trump too. Discuss.
I hear you. Can I say what that moment reminds me of, honestly, about Obama and Chair, am I right, is how the willingness to win, particularly in that kind of like establishment liberal era, overwhelmed their value to do anything, to overwhelm their value to like winning was more important than what you were winning about. And I think
Yeah,
that
but there are other things he didn't compromise on. I mean,
well, hold on.
yeah, yeah, okay.
I read this Jeremiah Wright thing 2 months ago, thinking
Yeah.
about Zohran and some Israel other stuff. You know, the you should look back at Obama's speech because he's halfway mad at him for the goddamn America stuff, but he's really mad at him over his criticism of the occupation of Gaza. He's really mad at him over that. And to me, and the speech in question about America's not applying its values of justice here and abroad is one that is increasingly agreed upon among Democratic electorate and base. Now, it could have taken some years. It could take time. I'm not saying Jeremiah was right is all good and bad. All I'm saying is really to the point you're making about winning. I think an increasing generation of people, and particularly younger people, see it in the opposite way, where they say politicians, particularly Democrats, have only thrown the same people under the bus for the purposes of winning, and they're not taking that electoral calculus anymore.
Well, I take issue with that only in the way that Democrats suck pretty bad at winning.
Well, they've been doing all that moderation. It hasn't worked out for them. So, I mean, yeah, what's it going? Well, what is it? What's it?
Sure. But I want to talk about that and separate personality / persona / approach and dynamism versus policy. Those are married to each other. I think intelligent people, like I hope you and I are, would say they are. But I think Zohran Mamdani's policies wrapped up in even in a more experienced but less gifted politician, that guy goes nowhere.
Zohran Mamdani's policies wrapped up in a politician.
Zohran Mamdani is like not a shooting star, is a rising star. In what differentiates him, other people could talk about affordability and might want to have, I haven't exhaustively looked at Brad Lander's plan. But I don't know that Zohran Mamdani has the most brilliant left plan ever brought to bear on the city of New York. What he does have, undeniably, is great, as my kids would say, riz. He's got charisma. He's got oratorical skill. He's got deafness. I mean, that guy in a 1-minute answer, like he's as good as I've seen recently. And that's not to not give him credit. I'm just saying his policies combined with those things matter a lot. But look, Trump, he's an effective politician. I don't like him, but to his base, he's a riveting raconteur. He's not boring. You don't know necessarily what he's going to say. So those things matter.
The similarity between Zohran and Trump, in my opinion, is their focus on mass politics. They're not trying to calibrate for the center, and they're not trying to reflect the party as it is. They are trying to cut the party out, reach people directly, and those people shift the party. Now, I think, in general, the Democratic establishment's bureaucratic hold, its kind of technocratic hold on its electorate, is over. It's over. They've blown that up.
Isn't the example of that? Let's go back to your tradition bucket. It's not quite what you meant, but I've just been thinking I might steal it from you.
All means, go ahead.
It has to be a very nice bucket. Maybe it's like a champagne bucket, not like a cleaning bucket. In the old days, in my formative years, the person who was always going to be the one everyone bet on would be the attractive, polished, predictable, speaking sound bites. I mean, that's where soundbite came from, right? The original innovators were the soundbite guys.
Yeah.
Right? Because in the old days, you gave like a freaking 3-hour speech from, shall we say it again, the hustings. And that's grown weary, right? Like the most polished, often white male, handsome guy, taller, never bald, was always going to be the guy.
And it was all about triangulation. It was always about like halfway saying something without really saying something.
So let me put two people against each other. So in the older days, Hakeem Jeffries would be, I think, the more attractive candidate to a segment of the population. I think Hakeem Jeffries, you tell me, is not in a good spot. politically because the way, I don't know if he's not. I was going to say I'm getting tongue tied because I was going to say he's too polished, but he's not very polished. His back and forth BS on supporting or not supporting Mamdani
Yeah.
is trying to navigate.
But this is what I'm saying about
people are
leading from
sick
the
of.
premise
Aren't people sick of politicians like Hakeem Jeffries?
I think people are sick of that triangulation. I think he would have been better off if he just said, "Hey, I'm not endorsing the guy." Like,
Yeah,
he could have just said that months ago.
yeah.
And so all I'm saying is I think from the moderate place to the left, both sides are going to increasingly speak in direct language. And I think that era of what I think Harris is kind of the best example as someone who you could feel searching for that triangulated answer. I think people are really off put by that. And so all I'm saying is it's not as if I think that the way Zohran will be applied broadly is strict from the ideological point of view. I also think it's a mode of talking and a mode of doing politics that even the center can embrace. If I was the center, I would be trying to do things that more tangibly affected people. I would be trying to do, and the last thing I'll say is, I don't think you can just, I don't think you can just separate his kind of aesthetic from his advocacy. The reason and this is in the story too, the reason on the road he is trusted about affordability, particularly to stand up to landlords or whatever, is because of Palestinian advocacy. Like, he has the brand of I speak up. And so I don't think you have to do that just on Gaza, but I do think you have to be trusted. And so right now, among Democrats, criticizing Israel is 80-20, you know? And
yeah,
so that's not small.
There are a lot of, I don't know if it's 80-20. There are a lot of.
The Gallup stuff is wild. You should look. You should look.
Do you think that Jewish citizens in New York can, in good faith, be at a minimum really concerned about Mamdani's positions and the statements he has made, and at worst think that their lives will be less safe? Is that not? Are there not people who, in good faith, believe that?
That's literally not a question you can ask me. I don't. That's not. How could I say whether it's a good faith for them to think something? I don't know.
We're opining about a lot of people, and a lot of
I don't know.
People
I have no idea. I can say I asked Jerry Nadler if you think his advocacy has been too much for Jews, and he says, "Well, I don't think anyone's more unpopular than Netanyahu." So I'm saying even among, so I think there's definitely a type of person who's never going to like him, Jewish, non-Jewish, like a whole bunch of people. That's not really what I'm saying. I'm saying if Democrats want to win the voters they lost in November, they have to return a trust deficit that they've eviscerated. You know, they had a massive trust deficit. And so whoever they are, they need to find a way to bring that back. Be more honest about the process, be more honest about Biden, be more honest about policy mistakes, whatever they want to do, sure. But that voter is not just coming to the left because they're some massive progressive. No, they're coming to them because they've earned trust about fighting back against the named villains. And I think the center is going to have to deal with that in some way too.
What is, when you talk to Zohran Mamdani about his relationship with the Jewish community, what does he say? What does he say about walking back global intifada comment and things like that?
He says a lot. He says that he talks about like how he feels that he is put into a caricature of only like one type of Jewish supporter, and that he feels like it's been flattened, and there's a lot of different types who he engages with on a lot of different types of fronts. I know that they have been making more efforts to try to go not just to progressive or liberal Jewish spaces, but even places that will be more skeptical of him. They did that particularly during. So I'm saying, like, I don't know what they say, but he also will say, and this happens to me a lot too, I will talk to some critics of his who will be like, well, my core problem with him is that his entry point to politics is his advocacy for Palestinians, that is core to his political beliefs and how he got into the game. And he says, absolutely. Like, you know, like, if that's the disagreement, it's not a disagreement. Like, he knows that. Like, it's just about whether you find that, whether you find if you find him supporting BDS and starting a Students for Justice in Palestine branch at Bowdoin to be inherently anti-Semitic, then that's your answer. He did do those things. He does believe those things. Now, he says that those things will not be a litmus test in his administration. He's telling everybody who will listen to him publicly and privately that he's not going to be asking about Israel or BDS or anything when he's staffing. Now, do you want to believe that or not? That's up to you. But did he have those beliefs? Yes. Does he say those beliefs are going to be in the office? No.
Is Gaza, Israel, is that a kitchen table issue in the way we define it?
Yes. Right now. 100%. Has been for more than a year.
Yeah. Is Ukraine a kitchen table
not
issue?
In the same way.
What else is a new kitchen table issue out of?
I don't know. I'm just saying, like, TikTok feed.
No, because it's interesting.
Point, like,
it's interesting to me.
I think actually Gaza is a great example of something that wouldn't be talked about as a kitchen table issue, but is 100% a kitchen table issue.
Yeah. Again, in the way that you mean, which is people talk about there, not that it affects the price of eggs.
Yes. I mean, it literally is discussed there. And so I think that, like, the core thing we're discussing is still true. That I feel like when people collapse on the economy and, like, providing for people tangibly, everything else in your agenda is going to get under that. So I think for 100%, the biggest thing that Donald Trump has done and has been tariffs and confusion. That always matters more. But does that mean that the other issues aren't affecting? I think that has been a big mistake to assume. And I think this is increasingly true as we have a larger and larger foreign-born population. I remember when the Biden administration was telling me, Americans vote domestically. And I'm thinking, how are we squaring that with the different makeup of who Americans are now? That's not true in the same way anymore.
Will we wake up next Wednesday morning, the day after the election, thinking we maybe should have spent more time on Andrew Cuomo as mayor because we got this wrong? How's it looking? Do you know how it's looking?
I would be very surprised if Andrew Cuomo wins, not just because of what Mamdani put together in the primary, but they have an advantage at this point in terms of organization, money, and interest.
What about the turnout? So I'm hearing that I don't know much about this. There has been far greater early voting turnout. Who does that favor? Do you know?
Again, we're going to see a lot of projections here. Like, people have been trying to say it's because of Manhattan and blah, blah, blah. But I don't even think you can assume certain boroughs are inherently pro-Cuomo. That's not clear to me. So as of the numbers, Cuomo needs to spark a mass movement of people against Zohran, who we haven't picked up on in numbers.
Well, can he talk about 9/11 more?
Yeah, I'm saying he's hitting the buttons. He's hitting the fear button. He's hitting the 9/11 button. He's hitting the Islamophobia button. I don't know if that does it, but he seems to think it does.
Look, I have Zohran is quite a bit to the left of where I have been, and I have concerns. I also think he's got a lot of capacity and talent. Have you met anyone who is really genuinely excited about voting for Andrew Cuomo?
No.
Ever in your life?
No.
Have you met
anyone? Last time I remember someone excited about Andrew Cuomo was during the coronavirus, was when he was doing the press conferences stuff with Trump. Sure, then. But in years?
That's Curtis Sliwa. Did you watch the debates? Curtis Sliwa.
Curtis Sliwa's going to leave here with fans.
Best line of any debate, patting fannies and killing grannies.
I just don't see, and the thing about it is, I just want to say, I am not some Mamdani super fan. I just find Cuomo's actions in this, I cannot find, in my opinion, nothing Zohran has said is remotely as offensive as saying he would cheer second 9/11. I find that so offensive. And the willingness that so-called Democrats have had to lie and to engage in overt bigotry, I find wild. Why is the Democrats not find that wild? What's the difference between how Andrew Cuomo is talking about Zohran Mamdani and how Donald Trump is right now? Very little.
Oh, well, Cuomo and Trump are very associated at the hip. He claims that he's a big combatant against Donald Trump. They consort and have consorted. can I ask you a question about politicians who leave office in disgrace? And maybe we can consult in the tradition bucket,
Yeah.
Shakespeare or the Greeks. But like, what makes me crazy as a citizen is, and there's a other side of the coin on this. I'll mention the other side of the coin first. There is something refreshing that a lot of people think is the case when you have a non-traditional, non-government, lifetime service person like Donald Trump run for the presidency. He's not my cup of tea, but J.B. Pritzker is very popular in Illinois. Bloomberg, for what it's worth, was a 3-term mayor, and I thought a very good one. And then you get a guy like Andrew Cuomo, who can't seem to want to do anything other than be elected. There are other things to do in life. There are other ways to make a difference.
100%.
And it's Andrew Cuomo, it's Anthony Weiner, it's Eliot Spitzer. These are the ones I know from New York locally. Like, they can't go on and do something else and like die in peace, knowing that they've served and then serve in some other way. Like, what is it about their build that makes them want to have a comeback in politics, which is not an easy business?
I think they feel owed that perch.
Why weren't they grateful?
Yeah, I think they feel that it's a birthright. I mean, I don't even think this is just those type of people. I mean, Lord knows I spent 2 years dealing with Biden people talking to me about he was somehow just that God mandated a second term. And so I just think in general, when you're in that type of place, you're in the bad zone. And so more than anything, I mean, like, forget Zohran. Andrew Cuomo has basically run this whole race just demanding his opponents drop out and give him his supporters. And so because of like name recognition and polling, right? Like, and so just in general, I find like, when you slip into pundit brain and the justification for your campaign is one that relies on a kind of like electability, cross-tabby argument, you've lost the plot. I find that to be like a place you should start immediately getting nervous. Is why are you not justifying your campaign through ideas, through people, through support, through something tangible? Don't talk to me about some consultant's poll. And if that's the reason everyone else needs to defer to you, to me, that's not how democracy works.
My podcast cousin for now.
Yes.
Depending on how things go, we can go up the familial food chain, up the family tree. Astead Herndon, welcome to Vox Media. By the way, when we joined Vox Media, I had this problem. If I said it quickly to people, they thought that I was joining Fox with an F.
I've already experienced that.
So just so people are clear,
Vox.
VOX. Vox Media. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, folks, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode.